Subscribe because it is free.
They arrived late, of course. The chamber doors had already cycled twice when the humans finally strode in like they were showing up to a barbecue instead of the most dangerous psychological gauntlet in the known galaxy. One of them was chewing gum. Another had a thermos labeled, "If found, return to Earth." Sinar, the Council's senior archivist and designated scribe for the Test of Ascension, scribbled something bitter into his datapad. He'd seen failures before, thousands of species reduced to sobbing puddles. This group, though, wasn't even pretending to be nervous. To be fair, most species didn't come from Deathworlds. Earth was officially ranked Class 12, which was shorthand for nature is actively trying to kill you at all times. Acid rain, volcanoes, bears with knife hands, oceans full of monsters, and worst of all, each other. Sinar assumed the humans would fall quickly. Perhaps they'd punch a wall, maybe scream, but he didn't expect them to whistle. The chamber recognized the entrance and sealed with a hiss. For the next 40 standard minutes, no communication would be permitted. The rules were simple: survive, adapt, transcend. Every species got a tailored version of the test based on its deepest collective weaknesses. The chamber probed your mind, found the thing you fear the most, and made you live it. Sinar had watched proud warriors cry for their mothers, an entire collective's fragment into madness over nothing but silence. The humans just stood there, 10 of them in total. Mixed genders, varied ages, no uniforms. One had a Hawaiian shirt under tactical armor. The chamber generated the opening scenario: a childhood home burning, parents screaming inside, a lifetime of trauma distilled into a single unbearable choice. The average failure time for this particular scenario was 6 minutes. The human subject blinked, turned to the others, and said, "Well, that's messed up. Anyone got a fire extinguisher?" Another human, shorter, pulled a multi-tool from his vest and casually walked toward the illusion. The flame hissed and twisted, tried to react, but the human reached straight through it. His hand passed through the fire. He tapped the wall. "Holograms," he muttered and pulled back. "They're trying to mess with our heads," the first one said. Classic psychological warfare. "Hey, can someone write that down?" First test, gaslighting. "Got it," said a woman near the back. She was recording everything on a wrist-mounted device. Operation Weird Alien Mind Maze is live. Sinar narrowed his eyes at the footage. No screams. No collapse. The test's first layer had failed. That hadn't happened in ever. He checked the diagnostics again. Everything was functional. The AI running the test even recalibrated in real time, ramping difficulty exponentially. The hallway shifted. The walls closed in slightly, enough to trigger claustrophobia. In most humanoids, the air thinned to mimic suffocation. "Someone fart," one of the humans joked. Another snorted. "No, it's the walls. This thing's trying to make us uncomfortable." "Well, it's working," a tall man muttered, elbowing the claustrophobic barriers. "Reminds me of the subway back home." They linked arms and walked forward anyway. One of them was humming a tune. In the control chamber, the council's overseers were already whispering. Sinar didn't look up. He was too busy writing something he never thought he'd write. Subjects remained cognitively intact after Phase 1. Unprecedented. The test would now evolve to Phase 2. It always did. The AI monitored emotional response, adapted trauma sources, and escalated exposure. This time, the chamber simulated total isolation. Each human was separated from the others by false walls, and a unique personal hallucination was deployed to each. One was alone in a desert, sun overhead, blistering heat pushing toward lethal dehydration. He blinked, then reached for his thermos and took a long sip. "Arizona was worse," he muttered. Another found herself in a deep ocean trench, water pressure building, unknown creatures swirling just out of view. She sat cross-legged and started telling herself a story, some old folktale about giant squids and karaoke bars. She laughed once, genuinely. The third was in pitch blackness. Total sensory deprivation. "Okay, this is kind of cool," he said. 10 credits says this is what my brain looks like before morning coffee. The AI issued a recalibration alert. The simulation was not eliciting the required panic response. In fact, stress levels were decreasing. The humans had found each other again. Two of them used simple military hand signals to locate their squad. One climbed a fake wall using nothing but a bootlace and bad attitude. Another blasted through a door using what looked suspiciously like a homemade explosive. They weren't passing the test. They were ignoring it. "Sir," a junior technician whispered to Sinar. "Should we intervene?" "No," Sinar replied tightly. "Let it play out." The chamber unleashed Phase 3, existential dread. A void opened before the humans. It presented a simulation of Earth, but distorted. War, famine, humanity's darkest moments on loop. Species-wide failure, betrayal, despair. The humans stood silently for a long time. One finally spoke. I remember that." "Yeah," another added. "That was a rough century. We got better. That bit with the raccoons was wild, though." "Oh, for sure. Government fell, and they took over City Hall. Good times." They kept walking. By now, the AI had reduced its complexity. Simulations collapsed back into raw pattern recognition. Sound, light, pressure. A desperate attempt to bypass intellect and overwhelm instinct. A final failsafe. The humans, subjected to sonic pulses, retinal chaos, and emotional triggers designed to mimic grief and guilt, started dancing. The pulses became rhythm. One of them beatboxed. Sinar dropped his stylus. His transcript now read, "All subjects remain coherent. Minimal stress. Subversive behavior consistent with high levels of psychological adaptability and humor." He leaned back in his chair, eyes wide. These weren't test subjects. They were tourists. The countdown to force extraction began. All species were automatically removed after 40 minutes, unless they failed sooner. The doors reopened with a hiss. The humans stood there waiting. A few of them were holding snacks. One was wearing a simulation creature's head like a hat. They looked bored. "Was that it?" one of them asked. A silence fell across the observation room. Then, the lead human stepped forward and looked directly at the council's viewing monitor. "Cool haunted house," he said. "You guys do birthday parties?" Sinar stood, unable to speak. He just witnessed the first time in galactic history that a species walked through the test of ascension and laughed the entire way. The council's central chamber was silent. 12 species, each representing a founding civilization of the galactic Concord, sat behind curved benches of gold, crystal, and organic light. None spoke. Sinar stood in the center, eyes locked on the massive projection displaying the human team casually sitting on the test chamber floor, sharing trail mix. "They are breaking protocol," hissed Ambassador Illith of the Vereen. "The chamber has laws, ritual, purpose." Sinar didn't look away. They didn't read the manual. Then they should be penalized. For what? Surviving too well. On screen, one human had constructed a makeshift hammock using a test wall panel and paracord. Another drew crude cartoons on the floor with a laser stylus. One sketch looked like a grumpy alien with giant eyes labeled, "Definitely Sinar." He sighed. The chamber AI had reached full adaptive saturation. It had no more illusions, no more fears to manufacture that these Deathworlders had neither endured or mocked into submission. In one final attempt to reclaim control, the system launched a total environmental collapse. Simulated earthquakes, temperature swings, random gravity distortions. Psychological entropy, the fallback that had broken even the hive-minded Enthai. The humans treated it like a novelty ride. Whoa, gravity's gone. A woman somersaulted midair, laughing. Who needs leg day now? One clung to a wall yelling, "Zero-G yoga, baby." Another floated past, sipping water from a bubble. "This is just like the training we did on the ISS, only with worse Wi-Fi." Sinar rubbed his forehead. "They think this is fun." The Vereen slammed a tendril on the table. "They are mocking our most sacred trial." "No," Sinar muttered. "They're surviving it their way." The AI's core, built to analyze over 10 billion neural templates from across galactic civilization, flagged a rare result in its logs. Subject species behavior is non-conforming. Cannot resolve. Logic recursion error. Translation: the humans made computer cry. Inside the chamber, a new development was unfolding. The AI conjured a final scenario, one pulled directly from humanity's darkest mythos. A black sky split open, raining fire and ash. Massive, unknowable entities rose from oceans of blood, speaking in voices that shattered weaker minds. For most species, this would induce catatonia, madness, surrender. The humans responded by giving them nicknames. One was dubbed Squiddy Steve. Another, Karen, Queen of the Void. Someone stuck fake googly eyes on a spectral horror and started taking pictures. The AI attempted to inject despair-inducing frequencies. A human tapped the side of his helmet and said, "Guys, I think someone's Bluetooth is on." Laughter. The AI lowered atmospheric pressure. The humans took as a challenge, betting who could burp loudest under low. O2 conditions. Eventually, the system just stopped. The monsters dissolved. The chaos receded. The chamber returned to a featureless gray cube. Inside it, 10 humans sat cross-legged in a circle, casually playing a card game. From the council bench, Elder Tvac of the Hysterii finally spoke. "They've broken it." "No," Sinar said. "They've beaten it." The silence snapped like dry wood. "Impossible," Illispat. They encountered every failure mode, every psychological breakpoint. They improvised, bonded, defied pattern recognition. The AI has no remaining scenarios to deploy. They didn't transcend, muttered the Cephan observer. They didn't evolve. "No," Sinar agreed. They laughed through all of it, and not because they didn't feel fear, because they felt it, and decided it wasn't worth bowing to. On screen, the humans were now building a blanket fort. One of them had clearly scavenged pieces of the AI's sensory pylons to rig LED lighting. Council murmurs turned into arguments. The Hysterii wanted to study them. The Varine wanted to ban them. The Cephans wanted to run the test again with harsher parameters. Sinar stepped forward and broadcast a signal into the chamber. The humans paused mid-pillow construction. A voice echoed into their space. "This is Sinar of the Galactic Concord. What are you doing?" One human looked up, fixing the feng shui. "Your murder maze has terrible vibes." Another added, "You guys ever think about throwing a snack bar? Bit of water, some granola, mental trauma. It's a solid mix. Very immersive. You do realize this was a test of your psychological and spiritual worth?" "Sure," someone said. "But who decide the rules? You guys?" "Yeah," another said. "And no offense, but those rules suck. We figure we just do it the human way." Sinar hesitated. "Which is what exactly?" "Try everything. Break nothing we can't fix. Laugh when possible. And if all else fails, improvise." One of them held up a card from the game they were playing. It read, "Reverse." "Also," he added, "never underestimate the power of Uno." The feed cut. Sinar turned to the council. They didn't pass because they were fearless. They passed because fear didn't stop them. No other species has done that. The Hysterii leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we endorse them? Include them among the progenitor guard?" Sinar said nothing. Then, slowly, he turned the council monitor around, showing the feed again. One human had drawn a face on a wall panel and was now pretending it was his new alien best friend. "Hey guys," he said in a deep voice, mimicking an alien accent. "I am the guardian of existential dread, and I love cuddles." Sinar stared, deadpan. "I'm suggesting," he said, "we at least ask them not to come back unsupervised." They were supposed to leave. Standard protocol after any test of ascension was immediate debrief, followed by escorted removal from the Concord core. The humans naturally ignored this. "Transit shuttle's broken," one claimed while sitting upside down on a bench. "Actually," another added, tapping a data terminal he definitely wasn't clear to access, "we think it's just selectively unavailable, probably to keep us contained." He looked at Sinar through the monitor feed and grinned. "Hey, you guys doing the whole ominous quarantine vibe? Kinda cliche." Security requested permission to intervene. Sinar declined. He knew better. Sending a detainment squad into a room full of amused humans was like throwing tofu at a pack of wolves. Not because they'd attack, because they'd play with it, and probably name it Dave. Instead, Sinar opened a diplomatic line and asked the only question that mattered. Why did you come? There was a pause. Then one of them shrugged. Because you told us not to. Sinar blinked. That's it? Well, yeah, you built a whole psychological meat grinder and told the whole galaxy only the best would survive. That's basically a giant neon sign to humans. Try us. Also, another added, someone said there was a buffet. There was not. That's on you. A few chuckles from the background. Sinar tapped the screen, pulling up logs. The humans had triggered 98% of the test's emotional subroutines, survived every scenario, and showed signs of genuine entertainment. They were biologically stressed, heart rates elevated, pupils dilated, cortisol spiked. But instead of collapsing, they adapted through levity. Do you not fear death? He asked finally. A tall man with graying hair answered. Sure we do, but we've met it before. Dated it a few times. Broke up. Got back together. Real toxic relationship. Humans aren't fearless, said another, leaning forward. We're just stupidly stubborn. You push, we push back. You throw horror at us. We name it, Steve, and ask if it wants lunch. Besides, a woman piped up, you think that chamber's bad? You ever had to file taxes while evacuating during a wildfire and comforting a toddler with an ear infection? That's Tuesday back home. Sinar stared. He believed them. The council, however, was less impressed. The Vereen were already drafting a formal rejection. The Cephans began compiling scientific irregularities in the test performance. The Trell, ever silent, submitted a 3-word objection. Too much laughter. As if humor disqualified survival. Sinar paced. The footage didn't lie. He rewatched the moment the illusions failed. When the chamber pushed its most brutal visions, and the humans didn't freeze or pray or fold inward. They grinned. They cracked jokes. They sang. No species had ever sung during the test. Sinar returned to the chamber, this time in person. The doors opened with a hydraulic hiss, revealing what could only be described as a post-apocalyptic kindergarten. Blankets tied to pylons. Doodles on the wall. A coffee station. One human stood, holding out a cup. Tea? We found the replicator's British setting. Sinar declined. You have violated protocol, security boundaries, and the spirit of the test. Correct, the human replied, cheerfully sipping. You weaponized sarcasm. Also correct. You broke the AI. Don't undersell us. We emotionally confused it into submission. Sinar took a breath. You turned a sacred rite into a social experiment. That's what humans do, said a voice from behind him. Another stood near the makeshift coffee station, examining a hologram of the chamber's core architecture. You made a machine to measure worth. We questioned who built the ruler. The test is older than your species. Then maybe it's due for an update. There was no malice in their tone, just blunt honesty. Sinar knew this wasn't arrogance. If anything, it was restraint. They hadn't tried to win. They just refused to lose. Sinar spoke slowly, choosing each word like a loaded weapon. You understand that many here will reject you. Sure, one human said, kicking their feet up on a broken simulation panel. Most people hate mirrors when they're not ready. A pause. No smile. Just truth. You didn't break the test, Sinar admitted. You broke our assumptions. Even better, came the reply. That means there's still hope for you guys. The doors behind Sinar hissed again, this time by someone else's command. For council guards entered, ceremonial armor gleaming. Their weapons were non-lethal, but intimidating. One carried a restraining veil. The humans stopped moving. Tension filled the air like a wire stretched tight. The lead guard spoke. By council order, you are to be removed from the core and remanded to your vessel pending review. Resistance will be considered hostile. One human raised a brow. Are we being grounded? Another whispered, I told you guys not to draw on the walls. The guard lifted the veil. The human stood slowly. Sinar moved between them. This is a mistake. They trespass. They passed. In a way no species ever has. Too human, the guard said flatly. That's not a crime. It should be. That was the moment. The chamber, once a symbol of impossible trials, now housed a different kind of decision. Not of fear, of choice. And the humans? They just looked at each other. One shrugged. Fine, we'll go. The others nodded. Calm, even amused. But before leaving, one stopped beside Sinar. You know why we laughed? Sinar looked up. Because if we didn't, we'd cry. And we've done enough of that. But we're still here. And just like that, they left. Not broken. Not denied. Just waiting, because whether the council liked it or not, the test was no longer theirs alone. Days passed. The humans were gone. Escorted back to their vessel, sealed under diplomatic lockdown, and denied access to Concord systems. The council resumed normal sessions, but nothing felt normal. The test, once feared and revered, now hung over everything like a broken idol. Worse, its AI had gone dormant, refused to initiate again. Engineers said the system recognized no valid parameters for testing. Subject framework corrupted, it said. Truth unmeasurable. In the council chamber, debates grew more heated. They dismantled the sanctity of the rite, the Vereen repeated. They exposed that it was never sacred, countered Sinar. They didn't ascend, hissed Illith. No. Sinar agreed. They endured. Elder Track, who watched 1,000 trials fail, leaned forward. Perhaps endurance is its own transcendence. Then every species that ever survived should have passed. No, Track said quietly. Not survived, laughed. That silenced them, because that's what still haunted them. Not the resilience, not the defiance. The laughter. The humans had stared into the abyss and chuckled, not because they didn't fear it, but because they knew it intimately, historically, personally, and they'd chosen not to let it own them. The test wasn't meant for that. The test was designed to measure control, predictability, behavioral compliance under pressure. Humans were none of those things. That made them dangerous, but also irreplaceable. The chamber remained offline until it wasn't. Exactly 7 days after the humans departed, the AI rebooted. No command, no prompt. It just spoke one line, broadcast across all Concord systems. Subject humanity reclassified. Status, examiners. Panic rippled. Protocols had no provision for that label. Examiners didn't exist. The test had always been one-directional. A gauntlet to be run, not rewritten. But the humans had rewritten it. Not formally, not in code, but in principle. They refused the premise. They taught the chamber something no other species had. Humility. Sinar accessed the system directly. Clarified designation. The AI replied, calm, unburdened. They asked different questions. Sinar stared at the words, replaying the chamber footage in his mind. The jokes, the mockery, the coffee, the absurdity, the care. They hadn't just survived. They'd held on to themselves while doing it. And now the test, a mechanism built by ancient hands long since dust, had recognized that as something greater than victory, a different kind of triumph. Word spread across the outer colonies. Fringe species that had long been denied even entry into the Ascension trials began asking new questions. What else had the Concord misunderstood? What other assumptions had been mistaken for truth? At the edge of council space, a caravan of Arkari pilgrims refused Concord visitation codes and instead requested a meeting directly with the humans, not with the council, not with the elders, with the ones who'd laughed. A ripple became a tide. The humans were still in orbit, ship fully sealed, waiting. They weren't pushing, weren't demanding inclusion, just waiting, watching, and that, more than anything, unnerved the council, because it meant they could walk away. They didn't need the Concord, but the Concord maybe needed them. Sinar called for a vote, to acknowledge humanity as a transitional species. Gasps echoed. That status hadn't been invoked in over 12 millennia. It was a classification for those who changed the framework, not just pass the test. Redefine it. The vote was close. 7 in favor, 4 opposed, 1 abstained. It passed. And just like that, the humans were invited back, not to be tested again, but to speak. Sinar met them at the docking platform. No guards this time. No ceremony. Just 10 humans stepping out of their ship like they were arriving at a weekend retreat. Backpacks. Coffee mugs. One had a portable speaker playing jazz. Sinar stepped forward. The council has reconsidered. The lead human nodded. Took you long enough. You changed the system. Didn't mean to. You broke the AI. That part we did on purpose. A pause. Your laughter, Sinar said, unsettled many. The woman smiled. Good. If you're comfortable during a crisis, you're probably not doing it right. Sinar exhaled. They want to hear from you. The humans exchanged glances. Then one asked, You mean the same way you heard us before, or actually listen this time? There was no malice, just the quiet confidence of a species that clawed its way through ice ages, extinction events, plagues, wars, and Mondays, and still managed to throw barbecues after. This time, the council chamber didn't posture. The humans didn't kneel, didn't offer tribute, didn't ask permission. They just talked about failure, about laughing in the dark, about surviving not as perfect beings, but as stubborn, curious, chaotic ones. They didn't ask for seats. They asked why the table had only 12. And in that moment, something ancient cracked, not with violence, but with possibility. Because laughter isn't weakness. Sometimes it's armor. And humanity wears it like a second skin.